It's a super fight that really does feel like a special occasion. The pound-for-pound #1 and #2 are facing off in Perth, Australia, with the lightweight title up for grabs. The featherweight king Alexander Volkanovski will make his UFC lightweight debut and attempt to upset the odds by taking out one of the most informed fighters in the sport, Islam Makhachev. Naturally, the MMA community is split down the middle with their predictions, and for this video we're going to check in with some of the sport's biggest names to see what they think. Habib Nurmagomedov. To kick things off, let's take a look at what Islam's mentor and friend Habib Nurmagomedov has to say. In his mind, for as much as Volkanovski has faith in his cardio, Islam's tireless work in the clinch is going to do a number on his gas tank. The problem for Volk is that Makhachev will be able to force him to fight his fight. And for Habib, you can prepare all you want for that type of engagement, but when you have a true lifelong master like Makhachev on top of you, it's a different story entirely. Habib sees Makhachev swarming on Volkanovski, working down his defenses, stepping at his gas tank and eventually submitting him. It's not a knock on Alexander's abilities. In fact, Habib seems to be quite complimentary, but in his view, there are levels to this wrestling and grappling game, and Makhachev's masterful use of sambo will be the difference between these two great fighters when the UFC 284 main event comes around. Beneil Dariush. Size and grappling will be the key ingredients for an Islam Makhachev victory, according to the informed contender Beneil Dariush. After compiling a highly impressive win streak on his own in recent times, it did seem as though Dariush would be on the shortlist for a title shot, especially after his excellent performance against Mateusz Gamrot. But with UFC 284 hosting a major super fight like the one we got, Dariush will be made to sit on the sidelines and wait a little bit longer for his chance. His own prediction for the fight seems to lean towards Makhachev. The size difference is going to be a huge factor, and throughout Volkanovski's UFC run so far, Beneil just hasn't seen enough of his grappling to be confident to any degree about his ability to hold off someone like Islam. Many people point to Dariush's own physicality and expert grappling chops as a potential foil for Makhachev, but I guess we won't know for sure until he gets tested by the Dagestani lightweight king. Sean O'Malley and Joe Rogan. Sean O'Malley isn't the type of fighter to give out praise if it doesn't mean it, but when himself and Joe Rogan started to talk about Islam Makhachev versus Alexander Volkanovski, O'Malley had no issues in expressing just how much admiration he has for the featherweight king Volk. Sugar Sean gave props to the champion for how good he has become and how compact his frame is. But the question, according to Joe, was just how well Volk can navigate the gap in size between him and Islam. Rogan sees Makhachev as the perfect lightweight body type, and if Alexander, who is much smaller, is going to be successful to any degree, he's going to have to find a way to make his presence felt in there. We all know how dominant Makhachev looks most of the time, and even if Volkanovski is up to the challenge, he will likely come in with a noticeable size deficit on fight night. Israel Adesanya. You can always count on Israel Adesanya to make a very interesting point when he's breaking down fights. And when it comes to Islam Makhachev's super fight with Alexander Volkanovski, he does not disappoint. Izzy makes an interesting note of Volk's former frame, how he used to weigh 200 pounds. According to Stylebender, guys like that who carry that weight around in their youth, they develop a greater bone density that they retain even if they do eventually shed a few pounds. And from his experience training with the featherweight king, Israel, even as a middleweight, says it can be difficult to hold Volkanovski down, that he is strong beyond his size. It's an interesting take, and one that is unique to Adesanya. Whether Volk is strong enough to hold off the wrestling onslaught of someone as technical as Islam Makhachev remains to be seen, but coming from Israel Adesanya, this is one hell of an endorsement. Marlon Vera. Marlon Vera might be known best for his slow cooker style of fighting, his patient but often deadly approach to getting the finish. But in recent times, it has become clear that Vera is a very competent analyst. And when he was asked by Helen Yee for his take on the UFC 284 main event, his answer was as interesting as expected. Looking Islam Makhachev's victory over Charles Oliveira, Cheeto credited Makhachev's fighting style as the reason Du Bronx looked a little off. The constant fear of the takedown seemed to really sap his ability to be his usual self. The wild energy just wasn't there on fight night. However, Vera seems to think that Volk is a different animal entirely, and that his own mindset will actually be helped by the fact that he is the shorter man in there. He didn't give an outright prediction, but it's clear that Vera has been doing his homework and sees Alexander Volkanovski as more of a threat than most other fighters. You don't become a long-time UFC champion and pound-for-pound king without a seriously strong mindset, that's for sure. Charles Oliveira. The man who Islam Makhachev defeated to win lightweight gold, Charles Oliveira, offered his take on the fight for his old belt at the UFC 284. Having been in there with Islam himself, he actually saw some holes in Islam's stand-up that a fighter like Volkanovski could certainly exploit. But with that being said, he still thinks that Makhachev's route to victory is a lot more likely. And if he can get a hold of Volkanovski and drag him into his game, the fight could be all but over. Volk's striking, though, seems to be very interesting for Du Bronx. And if Alexander can use his strong takedown defense and carve out some success on the feet, we could well see a new champion at 155 pounds. But Oliveira's official prediction sides with the betting favorite Islam Makhachev. And we're certain that Charles will be doing his utmost to book a rematch with his old rival before too long. And if he can commit to a more offensive style against Makhachev than he did in the first fight, who knows, perhaps he can be a real danger to the champ. Michael Chandler. Out of all of the fighters we've listed so far, only one, the former Bellator champion Michael Chandler, seems to be annoyed at the fact that Islam Makhachev won't be defending his title against a natural 155-pounder. Sure, he made this comment in the hopes of getting the fight just before his eventual loss to Dustin Poirier, but even still, Chandler believes that the division would be better served if one of the many recognizable names within the top 5 was the first to test Islam's reign as a champion. Daniel Cormier. Daniel Cormier is indeed a respected analyst of the fight game, and as a fighter, he enjoyed one of the best careers imaginable. But let's get one thing straight, his take on this fight is most certainly biased to some degree, because of his long-standing relationship with Islam Makhachev. Both men have spent years training together at AKA, along with their mutual friend Habib Nurmagomedov, and when it comes to predicting his protege's fights, DC's words should always be taken with a pinch of salt. Sure, he knows how good Makhachev is, better than most do, but his take on this fight, let's just say it's a bit much. In his eyes, if Alexander Volkanovski were to somehow find a win against the lightweight king, it would be the greatest upset in the history of the sport. Seriously, that's how confident he is in Makhachev's ability to take out the pound-for-pound #1. That's one crazy opinion from Daniel Cormier. But hey, I guess we'll find out on fight night just how well-placed his faith is. Paddy Pimblett. In most people's opinion, Paddy Pimblett is a tier or two below the very best of the best in the lightweight division. It doesn't mean that he can't improve as the years go on, but to say that recent performances have not filled us with hope would be putting it lightly. That said, he remains one of the most entertaining characters in the sport today, and after taking some flack for predicting that Charles Oliveira would defeat Islam Makhachev, Paddy the Baddy was forced to eat his words. In fact, despite saying it somewhat respectfully, he jokingly said even he would have put up a better fight against Islam than Charles did on that night. As far as Volk's chances go, Paddy definitely appears to be a fan, but seems to be more excited for seeing this matchup play out rather than nailing down a singular prediction. Expect fireworks, folks. Alexander Volkanovski. We've heard a lot of people talking about Alexander Volkanovski's chances against Islam Makhachev and how he might match up physically. But what about Volk himself? Well, the pound-for-pound king is not short on confidence in his ability to give Islam a different look in there. He sees his own striking systems as superior in every single way, and when he starts working his footwork and his feints, Volk believes that Islam will shoot for takedowns with less care than he usually does. In his eyes, it will be his 5-round cardio that allows him to outwork the lightweight champion. And though most people would agree that he is the betting underdog, Volk believes that he will deliver an almighty shock on February 12th.